Welcome to the Go Big Redcast with Dave, Honky, Boomer, and Redcast Rob.
Welcome to the Go Big Redcast. I'm your host, David Gaspers, and I'm with Honky.
Please, no more Randy Gregory lighting it up on Denver jokes, people. It's been 8 hours. I can't take anymore.
I'm also with Redcast Rob.
Well, I'd like to officially announce that after my retirement from podcasting last week, I've spent the entire week with my wife and kids and decided I'm back.
Good.
All right. And also with Boomer.
Well, we're here to announce my picks for the Final Four this year. I've got Brisbane, Melbourne, Port Adelaide, and the Western Bulldogs. And wait, we're not talking AFL? What the hell am I doing here? Son of a...
Carlton, man. I mean, come on. All right. Well, Hunk, we got an exciting show for us tonight. You want to give us the rundown?
Yeah. Well, first, just preview for next week. Remember, mark your calendars. Wednesday, 23rd at 8:30, we're going to have Tyler Kai, the Associate Athletic Director for Leadership Gifts and Capital Projects on. And then Rob, of course, as usual, our promo code. You're on mute, Rob. Doesn't matter. Promo code Redcast. Go to hillmarcy.com/subscribe.
We're smooth.
All right.
We are smooth. I muted myself.
All righty. So without further ado, everyone, without further ado, our special guest.
Today we have a smooth conversation with a cool cat from the Lincoln JournalStar.
So find a mixologist to pour you something full of chemistry, because it's time to take a hip sip with Steven Sipple.
So fellas, we have another C-Towner, Columbus guy joining us tonight. Dave, he's a fellow Columbus High alum, Discover with you. And Redcasters, you all know him from his many years covering Husker sports with the Lincoln Journal-Star, his many appearances on Big Red Wrap-Up and his morning show with Early Break and Sip of Jake on 93.7 The Ticket. We welcome back to the Redcast again, Steven M. Sipple. How you doing, Sip?
Well, I'm doing fine. It's great to be with you guys. I'm really interested in your thoughts tonight. I'm always interested in doing these things. I'll just be interested to hear what's on your minds.
Well, we're also interested in knowing what's on everyone else's mind, too. So Redcasters that are tuning in through Twitter and Facebook and YouTube right now, make sure, send us in your questions, your comments. Boomer's going to be going through those. And, we'll try to get some of those questions asked and, we can kind of go from there. But let's start off with what we do each week right now, guys. And that's tweets of the week. And Sip, we've got three of yours here, and they go across all of the gambit here. It's football, it's basketball, and it's baseball going on right now. We had a football one with you here. Quarterback 7. This is on March 13th. No shortage of intriguing topics in Nebraska spring camp. Very interesting period in a proud program's history. Enjoy. And it was an article that you had on some of Thompson's reasons for choosing the Huskers. And we're going to talk a little bit about NIL and quarterbacks. And then a little bit later here, we'll talk some basketball. And you had a tweet on Hoiberg, and you've been a little critical of him times. It'll be interesting to kind of get your take on that. And then also baseball's going on, and we've just won yesterday, and it looks like we're going to win again tonight. So maybe we're going to start to get on a winning streak here, but combination of the three. Let's start with the football side, and let's start with I think you had a really good conversation that was on the Sip and Sam podcast, and we were talking about at that time kind of NIL and how recruiting and how things have changed. And you had a great quote. You said, in this world now, we're basically handing guys jobs. And it was talking about, not in a negative way, it was just that we're bringing in guys now, and Thompson is the quarterback. And I don't know if it's the competition or not, but NIL is playing a role in that. He's the new quarterback. He's pretty much looks like he's the starter. So did we hand that job to Casey? Is he clearly the best QB? I want to kind of get your thoughts on that. Let's start with that as we're in the spring ball.
Yeah, it's really interesting. I mean, it's hard to frame it up, except I would just say this. it definitely has the feel that he's the number one. They've sort of, I mean, he's taken 1 reps. We're just in this sort of different world now, right? He is the most experienced guy in the quarterback room. He's also happens to be the most charismatic guy. He's also happens to be the only guy who's making 6 figures in NIL money.
He's the best paid. Yeah.
Yeah, he's the most highly paid, right? But there's the deal. I mean, I know I always got to be careful. You guys are younger guys, and I got to I don't like to feel old all the time. I come from, I covered the team in the late 80s. And it wasn't like this. You kind of had to win the job, right? And but I would say this: let's say Casey Thompson, in the event he had 5 straight bad practices, okay, that wouldn't necessarily be his job at that point. They'd start, Logan Smothers could assert himself in that situation. Heinrich Harburg might be able to assert himself in that situation, or when Chubba Purdy is healthy, which I think he'll be back. He'll be back kind of full go on March 22nd when they get back from spring break. So in that sense, he hasn't been given the job, but it's probably his to lose is what it comes down to.
Well, we're a little old school here too. We had our own tweet, and last week we did a poll, and it was asking about should the Husker quarterbacks, should they have the green jersey on or off? And shockingly, that created a decent amount of feedback from some people. And from my perspective, I'm the old school guy. I'm like, you don't have a green jersey on. If you're competing for that spot, you're going to all be wearing it until you at least get a winner. Now, that's not going to happen. I'm positive with Thompson. I mean, I'm sure he's the starter, and again, I have no problem with that. But I do think that, especially at that backup spot, I mean, there needs to be a competition. Like, we're always one play away from who that next guy's up.
Right. I don't know what they'll do with the green jersey. You saw when Casey was at the podium on Wednesday, he had his green jersey on. It seems like we've just trended toward a world in college football where it's just more, they just don't get hit very much,
Are we aware of any other college football program that still, has full contact practices with their quarterbacks getting hit?
No, my scope's really limited. I've covered one program for 30 plus years. And
How about Nebraska?
Yeah. Well, I do tell the other guys sometimes, we get so locked in on Nebraska, we get sort of myopic. We know all their strengths, all their weaknesses. We know all about the way they go about things. But it would be nice to go around and see in this world how other programs do it, but we don't really have that opportunity.
Yeah, I've read up.
I don't know who's hitting a lot and who's not.
Yeah, and the thing is, you're hitting when you need to hit, and not just to hit, right? I mean, there's a point if you have a starting quarterback that's clear as day, and this came back to the competition part. If the competition's over for the starting spot, then I wouldn't keep hitting the starter. If the competition's going on for number 2 and 3, that's where you get some hits, especially when guys are young. You gotta prove it somewhere. I mean, I've read about Nick Saban hitting, Jalen Hurts and not Nick Saban personally, but having in practice, having hits on Hurts and Tua back in the day when they were practicing that way. And I know I'll say that and people will go, yeah, well, that's Bama. And when you have 5-star behind 5-star behind 5-star, but shockingly right now we actually have a little bit of depth and now Chubba's hurt and everything. I get it. But the point is guys get hit in football, and I'm old school that way. Right. But let's talk NIL. Let's talk transfer portal, the things that have changed in college football. And as old school as I am, I'm a huge believer that, I mean, we've got to win the things that we can win and control, and these seem to be the new things that are changing college football. So whereas 30 years ago, we were, at the forefront of strength and conditioning, the forefront of nutrition, the forefront of Husker vision and using technology. Today it's NIL and it's transfer portal. You guys had a great discussion today on the radio this morning, Sip, about NIL. Let's start there and kind of get your thoughts on NIL, how that's being used. We saw the Busing with the Boys interviews this week, and there is some money being spent here. Where can Nebraska make its hay, and can we really become a differentiator in that world?
Yeah, they can. I mean, they are. And what the stock answer I give to that question, or this to start the conversation, is Nebraska's NIL operation. And I say this with great confidence. In fact, I've told Jared Lambrick, who's the head of ABM, which is Athletes Branding and Marketing, which is Nebraska's NIL collective. I've told him what I say, and he's fine with it. I say Nebraska's extremely well structured, well organized, and well heeled. I mean, Nebraska's, I would say, quietly sort of probably gained an advantage, and it's kind of Nebraska's style to keep it quiet. Certainly Jared's style. I do think in coming weeks we'll hear more about it. I think he's ready to do that. But Nebraska's in great shape. I mean, there's a lot of sponsors, we'll call them. If you go into ABM office, for instance, there's a board that has them on it. It's very prominent banking institutions in Nebraska, people you'd recognize that are helping, and there's a lot of money involved. So it's I know it's kind of a strange conversation because it's been quiet. Now Parker Gabriel did write a extensive NIL article a few weeks ago or a couple months ago, but it's hard to get a lot of facts because Jared's not going to lay it all out. It's people's money, and so it's naturally sort of awkward. But did you guys hear what Casey said
about the straight figures that they can be making over six figures and everything up?
Yeah. Now this was I thought it was important. I thought those guys, Will Compton and Luan, did a good job of pulling some information out of Casey that was relevant, and people, I think they need to know. So Casey said there's 17 or 18 football players that have vehicles, for instance, now. Okay, I don't know that everybody knows that, but they're not driving around, and they're driving around. They're what you'd expect. They're big pickups, they're SUVs. They're not. It's serious. For instance, Casey has a place to stay free. The volleyball players, I know. Well, I don't know that every single one of them, but probably close. They stay in luxury apartments, real nice apartments. It's a great for free. I mean, it's a great selling point. I know, for instance, that middle blocker from Penn State that John landed, her last stop before she left Lincoln was at ABM. I mean, that, and I think that really helped, Casey Thompson said there's about 70 or 80 student athletes at Nebraska across all sports that have an apartment free, a car deal as part of their NIL deal. There's all different ways that you can structure these things. And I get kind of piecemeal information, basically. I mean, like an example is, as part of an NIL deal, a guy will be required to make so many appearances in a month. And, they're lucrative. I mean, it's good money. And Casey said, if you're a starter at Nebraska on the football team, you can make over six figures. Now, I'd say that's a bit of a stretch, but I think there's a lot of them that would have that. A lot of those guys that would have that opportunity. But that's some of the stuff that Casey said, and of course, he had the humble brag, which I thought was interesting when he said, "I don't go out of my way to do all this stuff; it just comes to me."
Yeah. Well, we're the same way on the Redcast, man.
Right.
Casey's very charismatic, and he has a good deal. I know where his apartment is. I know the links he kind of went to set it up the way he wanted it, and he can be a little demanding.
Now, do you think that kind of money that they put out there puts any pressure on coaches to make sure a player like Casey Thompson starts, plays, maybe gets more chances than another quarterback does? I know they're not supposed to have contact with the sponsors and all that, but And it's early in the whole NIL process.
It is. That's the thing, Boomer. I mean, it's started in July. I don't think so. I really don't. And you know what? We like to have like answers that cover a lot of different people, but all coaches are a little different. With Frost, I bet it has little to no impact. In fact, Frost probably doesn't, I don't want to say he doesn't know what kind of deals his guys have, but he probably knows, but I bet he's not overly interested in it. And no, I don't think Scott's the type of guy that would let that influence him. I think it could be complicated in other ways, but not in that way.
So, hey, Sip, I was listening to your radio show this morning. I enjoy Jake and Sip there, and
thank you, David.
It's a little short. You guys should go longer than 2 hours.
2 hours seems fine to me, Dave.
But Jake is like the grumpiest
young guy.
I love that guy, but man, I mean, and today he actually found a negative take on NIL. He was like saying, like, what if they're just playing for the money, not to win? And I'm like, I think you had a good answer in the sense of like it has to be like more relative. It's like, I mean, everybody's doing these NIL deals. So whether that's a Big Ten opponent or an SEC school or whatever, I mean, like all these players are going to get NIL deals elsewhere. So, I mean, I just think it's really interesting. Everybody's trying to tear apart the NIL thing, but it's so early, to Boomer's point, that we need to let this play out a little bit. And hopefully, we're going to hopefully be the experts at it, right?
Yeah,
as
Dave,
Nebraska has an advantage.
Dave, players need to play for the love of the game, like SMU back in the early 80s.
That's right.
This
Absolutely.
is the purity of football.
Marcus Dupree just loved to play the game.
Old school guys would tell you that's what football's all about, not about this NIL stuff. You play for the purity of it. Rob, you gotta.
Okay, so to that point though, too, Dave, is that I think that you're gonna find out too that it's gonna be much like professional sports, right? Because typically speaking here, if they're getting paid to do it, they're professionals, right? I mean, that's the short of it, whether people want to say that or not.
Their performance, it's not performance based though. So
it's not performance based. You're right. It's not, but they're still getting paid to be where they're at. And if eventually, there's probably going to be some players that maybe they're finding out that, they came somewhere because they knew they could make more money. But if they want to play further outside of college, then they better be playing pretty darn well and not be, lagging in order to do that, especially if it's a player, because most of the players that are getting NIL money are players that maybe these companies see they might have an advantage to partner with further down the road when they become professionals, right? Mm-hmm. But here's the question I had for you, Sip, though, and this is something that I think about and we've talked about on the Redcast is how do you think NIL is going to affect things like Bryce McGowan's coming back next year, right? From not to switch to, but like, how much is that going to affect it? Like maybe he says, you know what? Because like, I don't see him being anything more than like a later first round, second round pick. Right. And that's my opinion. And I'm allowed to that. Dave doesn't necessarily agree, but it's
Rob's wrong all the time, Sip. So
actually, I'm right. I'm right more often than not. But that being said, a lot of those guys end up spending time in the G League because if you're drafted that late in the basketball draft, you're being drafted by a team like the Warriors. You're being drafted by a team like the Nuggets, somewhere like that, because it's later in the rounds. Those are the teams that made it deepest into the playoffs. And so, while they maybe they don't want to spend all their time in the G League, right, for the first couple of years that they're there, or over in Europe, basically ending up like a, Nico Mannion, right? Who's now playing in Europe. He's on the Warriors. He was perfectly fine last year. He was putting up some pretty good numbers in the league, but now he's playing over in Europe because,
so the question, Rob,
the question is like, do you think that's going to affect it?
Oh, it can affect. Yeah. I mean, it's, again, we're in a case by case situation now with Bryce McGowan's. I don't think that his NIL package. No, I don't pretend to know exactly what it is, but I've have enough people I talk to that it wouldn't. I mean, what he was making. It sounds so weird to say what he was making, but the NIL package he had this year wouldn't draw him back, and maybe they could enhance it. I don't know what they. Interestingly, the men's basketball team is the one team that doesn't work a lot with ABM. I wouldn't want to get into all that, but I would say this. So case by case basis. So Feldarius Payne, I know, he went into the portal. Feldarius went into the portal, and then he got an NIL deal and went back on the team, and then for whatever reason went back in the portal. But he was drawn back in part by an NIL deal. So yeah, that's an example of where it can definitely have that effect.
Rob's question, Sip, actually goes back to I think it was right when Doc Sadler was on the hot seat, and I can't. One of the Hawks, I believe, did a full page ad right in one of the papers.
Yeah,
and
Howard
made
Hawks.
The case that we needed to invest in Nebraska basketball.
Howard Hawks' son did that. Actually.
Right, exactly. And he was making the case that we need to spend more money on Nebraska basketball. And so when we had this conversation a couple of weeks ago, kind of the theory is well, I mean, you could see one of those boosters saying boy, just to get us over the hump, to get Fred over the hump, if you could pay Bryce an NIL worth $1 million, $1.5 million to keep him and Trey back for one more year, that could be a game changer for the program. Suddenly you have an all Big Ten player and Bryce McGowan's back, so would there ever be a moment where there's a booster that's willing to step up to that level and to keep someone like Bryce McGowan's here?
I mean, I've never heard of anything that dramatic. But there are, Nebraska does have boosters that are certainly capable of that.
Mm-hmm.
They have, the people that are heavily involved in this, and I'm going to say the last I saw on that board was a dozen and I'm not going to get into the entities, but they're known entities in Nebraska, very, very common names that you would recognize. I mentioned one of the banking institutions. Would an individual step up to that level? It's conceivable. There's a lot of money involved in this. And again, as I said, when I started off, when I say well organized, well structured, and well heeled, I mean it. I mean, it's, and I would say, Dave, you said something earlier that everybody has these things in place. It's not true. Not everybody does. Nebraska's ahead of the game compared to a lot of places, not all places, but you heard Casey. I mean, Casey said at Texas last year that the only 3 football players that had NIL deals were Bijan Robinson himself and one of their better defenders. So it was not, and his dad told me, Charles Thompson told me that he was surprised how many student athletes at Nebraska benefit compared to Texas. I would tell you that Wisconsin's not. They don't have any kind of structure.
They've struggled, from what I've heard, to just even get any of that.
No, they have. I mean, as of a few weeks ago, they had virtually no structure in place. So Nebraska's it's just quietly done this, but it's a formidable operation.
Well, and having open doors.
Go ahead. Open doors.
Having open doors located right down here too. I mean, I know they were prepping for this, a year in advance, at least, of the actual turn-on date of NIL, which is sometime last summer, August 1st, July 1st. I have one last question on this, and we can move on to maybe some of the changes that have happened over the offseason. Just kind of a fun question, I guess. Think of some former Husker coaches. How do you think they would have handled the NIL? Like Osborne, so Sip, if this was Osborne, he's the head coach, and NIL is now legal. How do you see him managing something like that?
Well, I'll tell you what. I hate to just spew cliches all the time, but that's about what I'm limited to. But the great ones adjust, and I think Tom had to adjust to different things during the course of his 25-year tenure. And I think he could adjust to this the way John Cook does. I mean, I don't know if you've ever seen John Cook's comments. John Cook's, I think he's 65. He's in John's old school, okay? But he's adjusted to this world. And he does it, if you read his comments, somewhat grudgingly, okay? This is not ideal for John. And he has said, I wrote a column about it a few weeks ago. He was on the radio show, and he he said it creates significant locker room challenges. Okay. And you know, you can only imagine he benched, you know, Lexi's son, who had a huge NIL deal. Now her NIL deal was on her own. That wasn't an ABM deal. That was, you can strike out on your own and do this if you're creative and you have the right connections. So, but John goes with it. Hey, it's a big part of Nebraska volleyball. I mean, when I say luxury apartments, they're living in beautiful places, and they and I'm not saying it's limited to that. I don't know exactly what their deals are like, but John, as I said, that Penn State volleyball player has an NIL deal, and that's the transfer, and I'm sure that's part of the reason she's here.
It would have been kind of fun to watch Bo, I think, deal with some of these things.
No, it wouldn't be fun. That'd be a train wreck. Yeah, Bo. I don't know. Yeah, I mean, maybe I'd say he would keep it at arm's length. You know, he could you know what? I was joking around. He could probably handle it. I've talked to a lot of coaches about it, and most of them just what they say on the record and what they say off the record don't jibe. I mean, it's a challenge to a lot of the guys, especially the 50 plus guys like myself.
Nebraska takes a 12-0 lead over New Mexico State. That's good to hear.
That is good. That is good.
Before we move on then to, I think, some of the coaching changes, Boomer, has anything come into the through the questions so far?
Yeah, we've had several. One from loyal listener Richard Fitzwell. We've kind of addressed this. He'd asked, with NIL, does it matter if they play as long as they get the publicity or advertising? And he brings up Quinn Ewers made good NIL money, and there was no way he was playing last year at Ohio State.
You know, that's a good question. It's so new, Richard. You know, again, it just started July 1st. So it's hard to, some of that stuff's a little hard to understand right now for me. I mean, you wonder about that. Could a guy's NIL deal get pulled? I don't know. They sign deals. I mean, they're legitimate contracts. So just depends on how that contract reads.
I mean, I would assume if there's some kind of behavioral issue, we'll just say, something that doesn't look good for the brand. I'm sure that, just like with anybody else, they could pull it, right? I mean, one of them.
Who's they? I mean, is that Lambrick making a unilateral decision? No, it's a really imperfect. I mean, what I've been critical of is college football laying it out too early without parameters.
The NCAA
without enough parameters.
Wait. Are you trying to say the NCAA did something that they didn't think all the way through? I'm sorry, Sip. Well, I'm going to have to disagree with you there.
Isn't that crazy? I think there's a lot of pressure to do it, though, and it just. Now, here's the big thing. I've talked to Trev about this stuff at length. Trev Alberts. What's really interesting to me is where this is probably going. I mean, there's pending litigation. You'd have to Google it, but I think where it's probably 3 years away where there will be, it'll be more uniform because the schools will be paying the money. I don't think we're too long from that happening, too far from that happening. I'd say 3 or 4 years. Then it's gonna get really strange. I think it'll be even more strange in some ways because there's a school of thought that it could be just football that's paying players, and the rest of the sports wouldn't. That's one school of thought. But what Trev's gearing up for is to make. I mean, he's making a lot of financial decisions within the athletic department right now that are geared toward the eventuality of the school paying the players. So his whole line of thinking is if this comes to pass, which it could, then they better have, I don't know, I almost hate to put a number on, but I'd say in the $40 to $50 million range ready to roll. That's a lot. That's a significant amount of money.
Yeah.
That not everybody would have either, which creates a whole nother discussion. How is a place like UTEP going to handle that?
Well, the same way that they've always handled it. I mean, let's be honest. This sort of stuff. This isn't the first time that schools have been paying players. They just haven't been quite open about it. I mean, there's a reason why teams like Alabama and Ohio State and Michigan and they continue to be able to recruit so well. It's just now it's the books are open. I guess you could technically
sort
say
of
now,
open.
so.
They're sort of open,
sort of
not
open,
all the way.
but I mean, more than they were before. I mean, are they going to give Reggie Bush his Heisman back? That's what I want to know. I mean,
the key for people to remember is up until this point, until as everything Trev's preparing for, until that point, none of this is going through the university. It's all outside of it. You're not getting paid from that. So NIL is what you're doing on your own time outside of that, and it's a cataclysmic change from what we were doing before. I mean, to your point, they were taking Heismans away from people, and there was Tattoo Gate for things that are not even close to being illegal now, and it was a very quick shift. So I'm not defending the old school guys that want to just stay with the way it was done before, but this is very quick. What happened before, and now it's allowed. But
I think it's been so quick that people. I don't know how. I don't expect people to fully understand it. It's impossible. But I'd want to add one thing. Yeah, the paying the players thing, I get. It's happened a lot. But I'm going to tell you something. At Nebraska, it hasn't happened a lot. People can talk about, the Irving Fryers, the Mike Roziers, but I've covered it a long time. And I know guys like, for instance, D'Angelo Evans, who was a highly recruited running back. He wasn't getting any money. I can tell you that right now. I remember because our conversations would often be, he wanted to go home to Wichita, but I knew what kind of car he drove. And sometimes he just couldn't get back because his car was terrible. He wouldn't be trusted to make it. He wasn't making money. I mean, I knew Jamal Lord very well. He wasn't making any money. Those guys weren't making any money beyond their scholarship. I don't think Will Compton talked about it the other day. He'd have $400 extra bucks after he paid his rent and utilities a month. And that was it. I mean, so I really push back on that notion that, it's been going on. Nebraska's always been paying players. No, they haven't. I mean, I think there's some cases where they have, but I don't think it's widespread.
Well, let's talk about some of the changes that have happened in the coaching staff here and what's going on right now, how that affects what's happening in spring ball, offense, and everything. Obviously, Whipple, new offensive coordinator. We have Joseph here and Applewhite. And as what are we starting to see on the offense? And listening to you, and I think you and Sam were talking, you were saying some of the things that, we're going under center a little bit more. There's still tempo. Yeah. It's a physical running game, yet we're throwing the ball a lot. The offensive line changes. Dave and I were talking about this the other night where it's like, it seems like it's all things to everything, right? I mean, we can pass it great. We can run it great. We can do tempo. We can get under center. We can still shotgun it. What is this offense looking like, Sip? And what have you had a chance to see so far through 2 weeks?
Well, keep in mind the media, Frost has actually scaled back what we see to nothing at this point. So it's just what we hear and then random. I get some guys that go to practice will send me occasional video. So it's limited to that. I think the big thing you touched on was they're under center now, which I think is a huge development. And I don't know how often they're under center, but it's enough that the kids have mentioned it as a significant change. You mentioned tempo. They're moving fast. Casey the other day termed it as an aggressive passing attack. And I know that I know some people get uncomfortable with that, but there's a couple of ways I alleviate my concerns that way. 3 ways. First of all, they're under center, and the way Whipple described why told me about all I need to know. I mean, a lot of it helps the run game. The running back has a broader spectrum as opposed to just lining up next to the quarterback in a shotgun, which cuts it in half basically. Whipple has that NFL background. He knows you got to be able to run the ball. He mentioned the importance of running it in the red zone. And then the third thing is the 2 backs that have now, again, I haven't seen it. I just talk to people who see practice. The 2 backs that have emerged are 2 big, tough, between the tackles running backs, and that's Anthony Grant and Jack Kazian. Ramir's right in the mix. But I think he'll end up being a little more situational now. When Gabe Irvin comes back, he's going to be a factor for sure. But Yant and Grant, I would say Grant and Yant, tell me what I need to know. And I've heard, listen, Yant's had a good early spring, and Anthony Grant's the real deal in terms of toughness. Now, I'm not saying anything beyond that. He's a tough kid, and he'll hammer it between the tackles. So, and I think Frost, go back to what he said in Indy last year at Big Ten Media Days. They had to learn. It took him a little bit, probably maybe a little bit too long to understand what the Big Ten is about compared to the American Athletic Conference. And much of that is it just involves being able to have a formidable run game. He wants it to happen, but I just think the offensive line held that back a lot.
Well, let's talk about the offensive line for a sec. And we had an interview a couple of weeks ago, Rob did, with Kevin Williams, the transfer from Northern Colorado. I just want to play a little clip from that here.
A lot of points on the board and playing physical. Win, lose, or draw, they're going to feel us in the morning, especially up front. If we're coming off the ball, we're running at you. We're here to, be aggressive. We're here to compete. It's going to be a fight all day, all night, So that's really the intent, and that's what I love about Raiola. Even with his technique he's teaching, you got to be in shape. Everything is you got to go. You got to go. You got to go. We got to run. Everything's running. There's no choppy steps. And it's physical. It's physical football, hard-nosed, old-school football, and that's what I love. That's what I fell in love with watching as a kid, and that's what I kind of was naturally doing when I would play, and I had to kind of go revert back to other habits or techniques. So going back to what you kind of know naturally feels a lot better, and I think a lot of guys in the room like it too.
Wow, that's good. That's interesting.
Physical football. You mentioned on the radio the other day, watching a clip of a fly sweep motion where they gave the ball to Yant and they double teamed the DN. You said the offensive line tortured the D line on the play, that Yant looked fast and made it to the pylon from the 20-yard line. That kind of play. I mean, we're talking, it's tough nose. Oh, yeah. It's under center. It's double teaming guys. It's as Bob Sledge said, they're going to be blocking 10 yards in their offensive line drills, not just, you're moving people out of the lanes. What did you see on that film clip that you saw there, and what does that look like offensively? I guess, does it look physical, like William said?
Yeah. And here's the deal. Well, that film clip, a guy went left in motion in a fly sweep type motion, and the right tackle and right guard doubled the end. I couldn't tell who the end was, but they put a hardcore double on him, engulfed him. And Yant turned on the Jets. Yant looked really good on that run, and I'm telling you, he's had a good spring. I know people always say, "Oh, there's Sipple again doing that hype."
Drinking the Kool-Aid.
No, it's not that. See, if a kid's having a good camp, he's having a good camp. I'm not suggesting they're going to win 9 games. And they look good running the ball. On that play, for sure they did. It was really impressive. And now, as far as this whole conversation about them being more physical with Donovan, Raiola versus Austin, it's not like a recent discussion. If you go back in November to the late press conferences during the last season, we asked Scott. I asked him at one point, and I think it was either late October or early November, like, what are you looking for up front that's not there? And he's just he just said then what he's saying now, which is, I want us to come off the ball and strike people like we used to do when I play. And we're not. And he goes, he said it's been very frustrating. We're just not doing it. Now, Austin's style is not to do that. And they had philosophical differences. Now, you would say, of course, well, why did he wait till now to make a move? Yeah. Well, the offensive line really didn't crater till this season. 2019, 2020, 2020, it wasn't that bad. In 2019, it wasn't that bad. When you had Hymas and Farniok, last season in 2020, 2020, it wasn't that bad. It just cratered this year, and the move had to be made. So I get it. Austin, and I'm not Milt Tenniper here. I don't like to get too technical, but his style was a little bit more, I'd say, conservative, where he didn't want to just hammer forward, get off the ball, because what does that lead to? Sometimes busts, and it can look ugly if you're not doing it right. But I always say, and people got really upset when I said it, or they just kind of mocked me, but I stand by it. Why are you confident in Donovan Raiola? And I say, because he's a Raiola. I mean, I know Dominic well. I mean, I've stayed in touch with Dominic for 20 years. I talked to Dominic all through this process. I trust Dominic at a super high level, and I know how Dominic played, and I know how his brother goes about things. It'll be different. Think about how Dominic played football. He was the most vicious center I've covered in 30 years. He was vicious. Dominic was a vicious player. It was beautiful. Great player, though. I mean, him and Richie, those were guys that you just wouldn't mess with. They got to get back to that. I mean, I don't know. I'm always interested. One thing I've been interested in about covering Nebraska is it seems like a lot of fans have let their standards drop to where it's like there's this sort of casual acceptance of Nebraska doesn't even look like it used to look like. They don't approach it like they used to look like. And like guys like Dominic they're not casual about it at all. Like Dominic, I loved what he told the guys before the Northwestern game. He said, we're going to close those gates. Nobody's getting out. That's the kind of stuff that fires kids up, but they got to hear it. But he said, we're closing the gates. Nobody's getting out of here. That's the mentality. That's the mentality that
with this transition. Do you see any challenge on seeing immediate results here? Will it take a little while maybe? Because to Kevin Williams' point, it might just be second nature to him, right? That's how they grew up playing probably Pee Wee football in high school. But a lot of them have a different philosophy here, and there might be some busts, right? I mean, I'm just trying to temper expectations on the O-line. I hope to see a big jump forward, but there could be.
Oh yeah, I mean, yeah. I think I have a healthy skepticism about the whole thing. They got to make it work fast. That's the thing. I can't imagine. It's got to feel like fourth down over there every day now. And
it's a good way to say it.
Yeah, and they gotta make this work quickly. And I don't know what I don't know what that's gonna look like.
Yeah,
it's really hard to say in football.
There's a lot of focus that's been on the physical difference of zone blocking versus what Raiola is bringing in there, more aggressive. But the reality, a lot of the issues that the offensive line had simply was mistakes in the past. You start off against Oklahoma, it's 1st and 20 before you even have your first snap and touch the ball because of 2 pre-snap penalties. You go back to the Northwestern game in 2020, and we've got 5 penalties on each offensive lineman. Each offensive lineman had one on them in that first half, and you could never get out of your own way. You drive down the field, but you're constantly moving the other direction too. And that's a problem that kind of just plagued Austin's lines at times. And that's, fair or not, that's the way it is now, zone blocking. Dave, I think you had a good point on it like a week ago. You're like, now zone blocking's bad. And, everyone says it's bad. Yeah. No, it works at places too, but
it does.
We're looking for something different. I've been begging for a fullback for 5 years. And guess what? I've seen occasionally by watching some Pitt film, I've seen a fullback here and there. Oh, there you go. Jason, can we bring back a fullback? So we're going to throw the ball, and Logan Smothers mentioned that, and Casey's, every quarterback's mentioned that. We're going to throw the ball at times, but there can be a running game here too. And I love the idea of marrying together the best of Frost's running offense with the pass. I will ask this too. Were you surprised at all, Sip, with the types of quarterbacks that we ended up going after since Whipple's been here? I mean, we've gone after quarterbacks that have some mobility to them. And I thought we were just going to go after, the stick in the mud, drop back, guy that can't move, and getting Purdy and getting Thompson in here. That's been a pleasant surprise.
Well, and what's the kid's name from Massachusetts? William.
Yeah. Then
Watson.
Pop
Watson.
Yeah. Pops, that's right.
Yeah. I mean, he reminds me of Tyrod Taylor. I'm not comparing him to Tyrod Taylor, but he reminds me of Tyrod Taylor.
Okay, write that down. Tyrod Taylor, Sipple said
it. He does, though. And I mean,
not a bad comparison.
You're exactly right. I didn't know what to expect. I always keep an open mind on that. But if you watch that kid in Massachusetts tape, he's a mobile kid. I mean, he can run it. He can definitely run it. So, I was a little I guess I don't want to say I'm surprised because I was trying to keep an open mind. It's interesting though. That's an interesting conversation. And again, I feel like, God, I got to tell you, not seeing practice is really frustrating from our point of view because we have, if you go back, I go back to Tom Osborne, we saw a lot of practice. Tom would let us watch all of the major scrimmages, for instance. And when Tom did it, it was like 100 plays, 120 plays. You'd be there for 3 hours. You saw so much though. So, you knew a lot. I mean, you'd walk out of there with a really good handle. And again, not just one scrimmage, all the spring scrimmages, all the August scrimmages. And then not only that, you saw a lot of practice. Tom would say, you can see the final 15 minutes is 15 minutes, but we'd go over there, with 45 minutes to go and see a lot of it. And then every so often he'd wander over and say, you guys are a little early, cut it back. And then we'd cut it back for a while and then go back over early. It was the same way with Frank. Callahan, believe it or not, let us watch every practice of his first spring, every minute of every practice. So you got a great handle. Riley let us watch a lot of practice, a lot of August, a lot of spring. Usually 7 or 8 practices full. Bo let us, we'd watch some. He cut it back, and then Frost just whacked it. We don't see anything. So it's really frustrating. You ask what it looks like. I don't want to pretend like I'm seeing it. I'm not. So I'm kind of like you guys. I hear what the kids say. I hear what the coaches say, and I kind of try to put an image in my mind, but I'll be fascinated in Dublin. Let's put it that way.
Well, I think a lot of it too, with social media being the way it is, and everybody just immediately reacting to everything, right? Like we've now become a society of overreaction as opposed to, analyzation, right? So it's like, that's going to put a huge damper on it. And I'm sorry that affects your job because I would have loved to hear some more stuff about things that you've seen in practice, right? But one of the question I had too about offensive line and how much do you think too that some of this play is going to be affected by the style of play that Whipple brings, right? Whether it, and we'll just assume Thompson's going to be the starter. So one thing that I've noticed from watching Thompson's tape is that his ability to release the ball quickly, find his receiver, open receiver, go through his progression, release the ball quickly. How much do you think that's going to affect the overall line play? I mean, in general, even because, the pass opens the run opens the pass, whatever way, but how much do you think that's going to affect it with a guy like Thompson at quarterback, not to throw anybody formerly at quarterback under the bus and not being able to make the proper reads all the time?
Yeah, quick decision maker definitely can make a line look better. How much it affects exactly how they go about things, I don't know that. I don't want to go too far down the Casey Thompson road either. We'll see what that looks like. I know what I saw. I watched all his games at Texas. He's certainly capable. He wasn't perfect though. What intrigued me most about him was his balance. And that's why I always look for an athlete is their balance. He's a tremendous athlete. He can run. And I think one of the things that drew him here was that running part of Frost's offense. I think you will see him run much more than he did at Texas. I don't know how it's going to affect that offensive line. That's just a big puzzle right now that I don't. We're so early in spring, 6 practices. Now there's a break. I think we'll begin to know more as we get close to the spring game. But hey, Rob, it's really hard to tell that kind of stuff right now.
That's fair. I was just curious, and maybe you'd heard.
No, it's a good question. It's a good question, and I know we all want all these answers. That right now I don't know if they're there.
Well, speaking of questions, Boomer, let's get one last chance for some of the questions that have come in. Any comments or?
I have another one from Jason Stengel. He's asking, we know if there's any other targets in the transfer portal?
Yeah, we do know that. I can tell you that. I'm thinking back what I heard the other day in terms of priorities.
Mathis,
I would say, priority is pass rusher, okay, I'm going to split up pass rusher and defensive lineman, two entities. So probably an interior lineman and a pass rusher. Inside linebacker depth they're looking at. Those are three things. And offensive lineman, offensive lineman, one. They want to get another offensive lineman. In terms of ranking those, I'd say pass rusher, defensive lineman, offensive lineman, inside linebacker depth. That's their I know that's their priorities.
Anything else, Boomer?
Just any questions about any injuries that we know of this early in spring ball?
Well, there's one.
Not naming names.
There's one. You know what I've heard about Fedoni? I don't mind saying it. What I heard yesterday, and I didn't get any updates today, but in part because the old man is off. There wasn't a conclusive diagnosis yesterday. So I don't know where that whole thing is. I don't know if you saw Thomas Fedoni's Instagram, but it kind of left open. He said he's just delayed. I don't know what that means. But as of yesterday, it was inconclusive.
Well, we keep our fingers crossed here. That's all I can say.
Oh, God, do you keep your
if nothing
it's a
else,
huge one.
Yeah,
that's
and
a big
a kid that's already come back from something, I'd hate to see it again. And again, we always say we're not breaking news on the Redcast. That's never our point. And we hate to speculate on stuff too, but that's hopefully.
Oh, I'm thinking if there's any other injuries. I've not heard of anything.
Anything else?
No, that's what we were pretty much going for, to see if you did that.
Actually, I'd follow up with the Chuba Purdy injury. I mean, do we feel like that's just like temporary, as in like a couple of weeks, or is he just kind of like going to be limited during the spring? We think he's back for fall. Do we have any idea on that?
Yeah, we have an idea. What the situation was sort of interesting. It was Wednesday last week when it was kind of quarterback day for the media, and Chuba in his session with the media referred to he didn't say what it was. I can't remember exactly how he termed it. But then Whipple in his session with the media said it was a foot issue. So Whipple kind of spilled the beans. So Chuba has a foot issue, but David, he'll be back March 22nd. So when they resume, they're on spring break right now.
So he'll be back next week.
Yeah, okay. Yeah. So they don't come back on Monday. I mean, the kids will probably be back Sunday, Monday, but they get back to practice on Tuesday, March 22nd. And Chuba said he plans to be full go at that point. And at that point, then he enters that fray, and he could make a push.
See, Dave, he's back. He can have the green jersey off.
I thought maybe Whipple was talking about his own feet because he likes to do the interviews
barefoot.
And what's up with that?
He's just I'm an old man, and the first thing I do when I walk in the house is take my shoes off.
So. Who was the pro coach that liked feet? What was that?
Oh God, that was Rex Ryan.
Okay, that's a whole different.
Yeah, that's not what we're talking about.
No,
totally different.
And what was the quarterback coach? God, all of a sudden now his name is eluding
Mario.
Me from Mario, right? Like, does
Whipple
have any Mario?
How'd you forget Verduzco?
Because I'm sitting here thinking about Whipple's feet. I can't.
If you ever met Verduzco, you'd never forget him.
Yeah. Well, no, I mean, Verduzco and I could probably hang out and have some edibles and go to a Dead and Company show together. All right, like honestly,
you live in Colorado. It's legal.
I'm really sad I didn't get a chance to talk to that guy, because I guarantee you we would have ended up.
God, I'm surprised you guys didn't have him on.
Well, we never had him on. Mac and I had chatted with him. We'd go to coaches clinics all the way from Solich to the first couple of years of Frost, and so like you were talking about watching practices and everything. It was great to see that stuff.
I know you learned so much. Seriously. I mean, I always told those guys, don't worry about me. I usually don't even know what I'm watching, but you learned. I just learned personnel. I mean, just knew who was where, who was good. As far as what they were running, it didn't mean that much.
Yeah, you mentioned like the Callahan era of practices, and I brought it up on the show, but like watching that 200 play 2-hour practice they had where Zach Taylor won the spot away from Joe Daly, and it happened during a scrimmage, again with no green jerseys on. I just want to be very clear there. Adam Carricker and Jay Moore and LaKeven Smith and Titus Adams and Stuart Bradley just beating the shit out of
language,
Zach Taylor. but he would get up and complete the next pass and just kept moving the ball. And it's like by the end of the scrimmage, he won the spot. That's the value when I see the value of just making sure guys are playing in real football conditions. Nothing against Tanner Lee's beautiful pass to the corner in spring game, but that doesn't mean anything if it's not real football being played. And
right. Now, it's my recollection
battle.
of that though, Matt, was they were green, they were in green a lot of that spring too. I think on that practice, so they pulled them off because they wanted to. They needed to determine a starter.
Yeah, that's what you do. It's when you need to determine the starter. Once you've got a starter, you take it off. But I'm on a dying sword there with that one. We've kept you a long time here, so we're not going to talk basketball.
I'm okay. If you want to go a few more minutes, I'm good.
Well, what I want to do at the very least, to kind of sum this up here, we have a great graphic designer, Swobes, that does some great work for us, and I want to use his graphic, and I think it would lead to something here. Frost has made a point about how we need to get momentum going. He said that going into last season. And then, of course, we have the dud against Illinois. So there's no momentum. Well, here's our first 6 games. Northwestern, North Dakota, whoever number 3 is. Georgia Southern. Thank you. I was like, is that Buffalo?
Don't give him bulletin board material, Honky. Come on.
Sorry to Georgia Southern. Who's coached by the guy from USC, right?
Clay Helton. I'm sure he listens to the show, and he's going to have that up all over.
They're going to be ready, man. Oklahoma, Indiana, and Rutgers. Okay, so of course, the headline there is, can we start 6-0? And Rob has already said we can go 15-0 next year. So I know what his answer is. I'm going to go around the room here, around the table here, and I'm going to I'll start with Dave, and we'll finish with Sip. Kind of talk about the first 6 games here, Dave. Where are you seeing? What do you think? What's the most important game in that, and how do you see that kind of going?
Well, I'm not as optimistic as Rob. I'm just looking for us to get to a bowl game. I don't want to lower my expectations, Sip, but I think you have to start somewhere, right? And so this year is getting to there and moving on. So I don't think we can go 6-0. I don't think that will make that big of a jump. But we could start off well. The biggest game is the first game. You got to go beat Northwestern. Without that, then you're already literally on the hot seat. So you just got to go out, beat Northwestern, hopefully be 3-0. Right. And before Oklahoma, is Oklahoma game 4?
Correct. Yeah. They're 4.
Yeah. I mean, that would be a real opportunity. And then you got an Indiana and Rutgers that, Indiana's beaten us. Let's not take them lightly. And Rutgers is probably trending in the right direction. So, but if you're looking at teams from the East to get, you want Rutgers and Indiana. So I could see a 4-2.
Yep. Boomer.
Yeah, I've kind of touched on this in prior shows. I think 5-1 is kind of what I'd be looking for to call these first 6 games a success. Maybe it's setting the bar high, but we've talked about how if this team is close, and last season was kind of some weird statistical anomaly that they lost all those close games and luck should flip another way. You've got to win these games. You've got to win that first game against Northwestern. Like Dave said, that's the key to this. We saw how losing to Illinois kind of derailed last season to start it off. You can't have that again. I mean, that just totally changes the narrative and puts you on that hot seat right away, and all the negativity starts coming out right away. You've got the 2, the bulletin board games that you're giving them, Honky, at Georgia State and, whatever Dakota we're playing.
It's North Dakota, I believe.
Yeah, it's a Dakota. It's all good. And then when you're switching out the Ohio State and Penn States for Indiana and Rutgers, because we've been complaining about playing Ohio State so much over the last, ever since we've been in the Big Ten, it seems like we play them 3 times a season or so. You've got to win these games against those teams that you're switching out for. So that's your chance. I think you got to start 5-1. That's what I'd like to see. That's what I would call success.
Rob?
Well, I mean, I know what I said, and I know that's kind of my shtick there with drinking the Kool-Aid. But I mean, obviously, I'll agree with Dave in that the first game is the most important game, and then after that, being 3-0 going in to playing an Oklahoma team that quite frankly has had a more tumultuous offseason than Nebraska. Right? They've got an entirely new coaching staff there. Their quarterbacks have gone everywhere. I couldn't even tell you who Oklahoma's starting quarterback is, where last year I could have told you their first 2 guys on their roster. So, I mean, there's not a reason why after the way that we played them last year, there's not a reason why we could come back and actually win again this year. All right. And that's my reasoning with that. I'm not going to say it's going to happen, but I'm going to say that, I'm saying there's a chance. And then, Indiana and Rutgers, hopefully Nebraska comes out 4-0 or 3-1 at that point, playing Indiana and Rutgers. I mean, those are both two very winnable games against, yes, Rutgers is at Rutgers and they're kind of trying to trend the right way, but they're still Rutgers. So, I mean, I think 5-1, 6-0 is not unrealistic because, I'm drinking the Kool-Aid.
Sipple.
Oh yeah, I mean, I'm first of all, you can tell I'm hesitant to do this.
Yeah, I hear you.
I am. I get trapped a lot in these things. I am sort of an optimistic sort.
I like you already.
So, and I didn't think this. We had a good discussion today. I thought it was a good discussion anyway with Josh Peterson, who kept terming Nebraska as a bad team last year, and I really took issue with it. I don't think they were. I know what bad is. They were competitive. It wasn't a non-competitive bad team. So my expectations are somewhat high. I mean, come on. They destroyed Northwestern last year. I think they should have a relatively easy time with Northwestern. From there, though, I'm not going to go too far with it because I don't know what these teams have. I haven't delved into North Dakota or Georgia. I know it sounds weird, but I haven't. I don't know what they got. I have a good idea. Oklahoma lost a ton, and I do think Nebraska should be able to compete with Oklahoma. I just don't see any reason. I'll just end it by saying this so I don't ramble. What my biggest concern is, it'll remain my biggest concern until I see them play in Dublin, is what they got up front on offense and what they got up front on defense. I'm not that concerned other than that. But that's a big concern. What do they have up front? I mean, that's what it's all about now. So I don't know.
I think what Dave said about Northwestern's right. That first game, I know what it felt like to be in Champaign last year, and September hasn't even hit, on the calendar, and that season already felt like, oh my gosh, what did we just get into? And that Northwestern game against a team that has a 56-7 motivation to prepare for us all off season, I have no doubt about that. But I don't want to create more bulletin board material, but I think we can beat Northwestern, but we need to. It's not just that we can. That game is so important. And to your point too, Sip, about what you're talking about with Jake about last year. Last year, bad. I guess that's one way of saying it. I'd call it historic. And we've gone over these stats so many times, but literally the only time in college football history where you've had 9 losses by single digits.
I would not characterize that as a bad team.
Eight losses by 1 score or less. 239 points scored and 239 points given up in Big Ten play, and yet we went 1-8. Which is just bizarre. All these things. It was a historic season on crazy levels. One of 4 teams ever to not win more than 25% of our games, but have a positive point differential. All those things are historic, and they're historically bad, I guess. I mean, you can say they're bad, but they're not bad in the sense of like what we saw the last year of Riley, where you're going down to Minnesota and you're not even competitive. You're not even competing. You're getting just beat up, or you go 9-4 like we did in 2015, but you're ending a season where bankers talking about, the bloodbaths that they must have in practice because we just can't physically even compete. Dave and I went to Ohio State and watched the 62-3 debacle and we were in the top 10. That's bad. And that's bad with a 9-4 record.
Yeah. Those are good points. Points.
Well, Sip, we usually kind of do a parting shot. We allow the guests to do it, and basically whatever you want to say. We want to thank you for being on the Redcast, number one. Thanks for doing the live stream here with us, and just kind of let the Redcasters out there know what you're doing, what you're up to, and what's your kind of final thoughts on going into the off season here.
The one thing I'd add to that discussion, first of all, is another concern I have is we have to be very mindful that Nebraska is playing a Northwestern team with Fitzgerald in his 14th year now. Mm-hmm. You're facing all these damn programs in the West with so much stability. I mean, if you look at an Iowa tape now of the 2021 season, it's going to look a lot like it did in 2003. So you're up against that part is very significant to me. I don't know if it is to everybody, But you have all this newness at Nebraska, and you're facing all these guys that know exactly what they want, what they recruit to. There's no questions like we're having. So that's that's got to be a big challenge for them. Well, I would just say I really enjoyed this. First of all, I did legitimately. I'm very genuine when I say that. It went really fast. I keep going. I think we better cut it off. But
we can go for hours if that's our
We
problem.
could go more.
I'm
trust
always
me.
amazed by guys like you. That it's scary in my position, frankly, because a lot of times you just know more than I do. I mean, so it's fine. I run into this at weddings where guys are asking me questions. I'm like, oh, wait a second. It seems like you know more than I do. So this is sort of awkward, but I'm impressed. You guys have a good handle on it. And that's how Nebraska is. This fan base is incredible.
I have this vision of I remember hearing back in the day, the Wistroms and Peters, if you go to the bar, watch out because you're the big tough guy and some big tough guy is going to come up and try to fight you. Sip, I get this picture of dorky little Husker fans that come up to you at a wedding and just want to have a Husker geek off with you. Probably me, probably someone like me that's I'll test your Husker trivia knowledge. Ha 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 ha.
No, I don't get that.
Okay,
good. I just get a lot of good questions from a lot of smart people. I mean, it's incredible. I know now at this point I sound like I'm over the top pandering, but it is a great fan base. Coming on things like this are really beneficial to me. I wanted you guys to know that. It's why I do it. I mean, a lot of the reason it's beneficial. I need to know what you guys are thinking. It helps me a lot, and I glean knowledge out of it too. So I appreciate that.
Well, we try.
I didn't know what that helmet was in the third game.
The most engaged fan base you could ever find, right?
It's pretty engaged, isn't it? Yeah, it's how I've made my living. So I mean, I always tell the guys, no angle too small, and that makes our lives pretty easy. I can write some stuff that's not all that good and get showered with praise. So,
well, Rocky and I always talk about how that the program will never be allowed to truly drift into mediocrity because the fan base won't let it, right? I mean, everybody else can mess it up over and over again for the last 20 years, but here we are after a 3-9 season, and here we are more than ever talking about Husker football.
Oh, this is intriguing. Season, right? Yeah, sorry to interrupt. This is as intriguing as it gets. I mean, I've never been maybe more intrigued than I am right now, which is a whole nother podcast, but thank you guys.
Well, we'll have
cool. So we'll see you next week then.
Sipple will be joining us next week.
Yeah, actually, you can find him at Redcast Sipple on Twitter.
That would be news to my bosses, right?
Yeah. We don't pay as well, so you may want to reconsider that.
Yeah.
Honky, do you want to go around the rest of the room and do other parting shots?
Sure, go for it, Rob.
Well, Husker baseball, I didn't even see what the final score was, but I do know that they ended up taking game one. Oh, look at that. It was 12-6. So they were up 12-0. They gave up 6 runs. But that's okay. They had a nice little cushion going, but they did take the game. I haven't been paying that much attention, but I do think that that's their 6th win on the season, Dave. Is that right?
Yeah, that's correct. They're 6-9.
6-9. So, just getting back to 500, that's the goal. And then from there, you want to win more than you lose. And Sip, thanks for coming on today, man. I follow you a lot on Twitter, and sometimes we've had a couple of back and forths on there, but it's all in good fun. And it sounds like you and I are kind of on the same page. So, that's all I needed was an ego boost. I really appreciate it.
Well, yeah, don't ever worry about picking at me on Twitter.
Sip, on your radio show, they always say "Shut up, Sipple." Here, we say "Shut up, Rob."
Is that what we do?
All the time.
I said, we have a lot in common, man. Hey, if you're going to be at the spring game, come by our tailgate and hang out, man. We'd love to have you. So
okay, well, thank you, Rob. Thank you.
Dave, I'm gonna ask you to do a
no. I don't do
shot.
Parting shots.
I
already said my piece.
Tell Byron hi, please. Hey,
we'll do.
See, Byron will remember. We were friendly. I mean,
he will remember you.
No, he will.
No, absolutely.
Yeah, he will. He'll remember me. I remember him very well. Super guy.
Hey, real quick, we did have one comment too, where some guys called you and Mike Babcock the Mount Rushmore of Husker columnists. So that's
we're the oldest, so that makes sense. Um,
Well, Chattel's got to be on that too.
Yeah, Chattel's on that.
We've
Yeah,
had
we're
Chattel and Babcock on too, so they've been.
Good. That's good. I'm glad.
Good
That's
time.
good to hear. Those guys are incredible.
And Boomer, we'll finish with you.
Well, we didn't get a chance to pick Sipple's brain on what his favorite AFL team is, but that season does kick off in about 5 hours. So if you're into that and up really, really late, you can enjoy that game kicking off, Melbourne. And other shout out today, I'm doing a two-parter. So since Honky usually does 5 or 6, I'll just do 2. And just want to give a shout out to the Redcast Other Great Passion Pro Wrestling. Noted wrestler Scott Hall passed away this last weekend. For those of us in our age and era, he was a big name and was pretty much responsible for the big Monday Night Wars. When I don't think kids today understand how popular pro wrestling was when we were in college. I mean, they would play it in bars when you'd go down to O Street. That's how big it was. And he was a big part of that. You might know him as Razor Ramon or just Scott Hall. Nobody could throw a toothpick quite like him and be that big of a jerk. And just kind of a great part of growing up and watching pro wrestling. So just our thoughts go out to him and his family.
All right. And I'll finish off, unfortunately, on another somber note there, but Nebraska track and field today, they tweeted out that we mourn the loss of legendary sprinter Charlie Green, passed away Monday at the age of 76. Green was a 6-time national champion, first Husker to win the Olympic gold medal, and a world record holder, a true Husker legend. So our condolences sent out from the Redcast.
Nice job, guys.
All right. Anything else, guys? We covered everything we wanted to talk about tonight. All right. Well, once again, thanks, Steve Sipple, for joining us. We really appreciate it. Hopefully we'll have you back again soon. But for now, let's call that a Go Big Redcast.
Go Big Red.
PBR.